If you've ever loved an avoidant, you know the pain isn't always a breakup scene. It's not always slammed doors or screaming matches. It's quieter than that, and that's why it gets under your skin. It's the way they can drift. The way they can go from warm to distant without warning. The way they can pull away and then act like it was normal. And when they leave, or when they emotionally check out, they don't always look shattered. They don't always look like they're fighting for air the way you are. They can look fine, even calm, even relieved, and that contrast is what messes with you. Because the human mind will always try to explain pain. If something hurts, your brain goes searching for a reason, and when you don't get a clear reason, you start making one up. And the most common story people write in that silence is, maybe I didn't matter. Maybe I was too easy to lose. Maybe I loved harder than they did. Maybe I was just a chapter, not a person. Maybe I was replaceable. And that story doesn't just hurt, it rewires you. It makes you question your instincts. It makes you doubt your worth. It makes you shrink in your next relationship before anyone even asks you to. That's why this keynote matters. Because it names the real wound, not just losing them, but losing your sense of value in the process. When an avoidant leaves like it was nothing, your heart doesn't just feel abandoned, it feels erased. And being erased is a special kind of pain because it attacks your identity. You start reviewing everything you gave. Your time, your softness, your loyalty, the way you stayed gentle when they went cold, the way you tried to communicate instead of explode, the way you kept choosing understanding, and you look at how easily they walked away, and it feels like the universe is telling you your love wasn't powerful enough to make someone stay. But let me say something that a lot of people need to hear straight. The ease with which an avoidant appears to leave is not the measure of your worth. It's the measure of how they cope. Some people process pain by feeling it. Avoidants often process pain by avoiding it. They don't always look hurt because their system learned that looking hurt is dangerous. Needing is dangerous. Depending is dangerous. Vulnerability is dangerous. So they protect themselves the way they know how, by shutting down, by going quiet, by acting unbothered, by turning the volume down on their own feelings so they don't have to carry the weight of them. And when you're the one who feels deeply, this feels like cruelty. It feels like you're the only human in the room. It feels like they were never real. But sometimes what you're witnessing is not a lack of feeling, it's a fear of feeling. They don't show the impact because if they showed it, they'd have to face what closeness costs them. They'd have to face the part of them that wanted you and ran anyway. They'd have to face responsibility, and responsibility can feel like suffocation to someone who survived by staying emotionally untouchable. So the pain becomes quiet on their side and loud on yours, and your mind makes the mistake of thinking, if it's loud in me and quiet in them, I must have been the only one who cared. That's the lie, not always. But it feels true because silence is persuasive. Silence convinces you you're alone, and that's why you start doing desperate math in your head. You count messages, you count days, you count effort. You count the times you forgave. You count the times you tried to be low maintenance. You count the moments you swallowed your needs. And you start thinking, if I just change one thing about myself, they'll come back and finally see me. But that's how the trap forms, because now your worth is being negotiated with someone else's behavior. Now your self-respect is living on their timeline. Now your peace depends on whether they validate you. This keynote is meant to interrupt that slide, to stop you right at the moment you begin turning their detachment into a verdict on your value. Because what's really happening is your nervous system is trying to regain control. When someone leaves without clarity, your system stays activated. It keeps searching, it keeps replaying, it keeps hoping. Because hope feels better than helplessness. But hope without structure becomes self-abandonment. You start shrinking to keep a door open that should have required effort to stay open. So if you're watching this and you feel that familiar ache, the ache of being treated like you were easy to lose, I want you to hold one truth in your hands: their ability to detach quickly does not mean you were nothing. It means detachment is their strategy, and strategies are not morals. Strategies are survival patterns. And survival patterns don't magically disappear just because they met someone good. And the moment you stop confusing their coping with your worth, you get something back that you may have lost without realizing it: your center. The part of you that remembers you are not defined by who stayed. The part of you that understands that being easy to love doesn't always mean being easy to keep, especially for someone who equates closeness with threat. The part of you that can say, I'm not going to beg for proof that I mattered. Because the real proof is the kind of love you were capable of giving, the kind that was real even when it wasn't returned consistently, the kind that deserves to be met with steadiness, not silence. Stay to the end. Because detachment isn't about revenge, it's about making reality unavoidable. And I'll show you why your calm absence hits them harder than your tears. This second keynote matters because it corrects the biggest misunderstanding people have about detachment. Most people hear the word and think it means becoming cold, playing games, acting like you don't care, or trying to punish someone into regret. And if you've been hurt, that idea can feel tempting, because pain wants to be witnessed. Pain wants someone to finally understand what they did. Pain wants your tears to mean something. But here's the truth. Your tears often don't teach an avoidant what you think they teach. An avoidant nervous system is built to escape emotional pressure. So when emotions rise, even valid emotions, they often don't lean in, they shut down. They don't interpret tears as, this matters. They often interpret tears as, this is too much. Not because you're too much, but because their nervous system has been trained to equate emotional intensity with danger. So when you cry, when you plead, when you send long paragraphs trying to explain your pain, you are offering them a kind of emotional proof of attachment. And as strange as it sounds, that proof can soothe them, because it tells them they still have access. They can pull away, but your heart is still reaching. They can disappear, but you're still there. Their distance is still controlling your emotional state. That's why this keynote promises something different. It says, I'm going to show you why calm absence hits them harder. Because calm absence is the opposite of what an avoidant expects from someone who is attached. The avoidant expects a reaction. They expect pursuit. They expect explanation. They expect you to re-open the door with emotion. And when you don't, something inside them shifts, not because you've become cruel, but because you've stopped cushioning them from the consequences of their own pattern. Detachment, in its healthiest form, is simply you removing your nervous system from the cycle. It is you refusing to keep paying for connection with anxiety. It is you stopping the endless emotional labor of keeping the bond alive when the other person keeps pulling away. It's you choosing to return to your life, your sleep, your routines, your confidence, your standards, instead of orbiting around someone's unpredictability. And this is where making reality unavoidable becomes powerful. In an avoidant dynamic, reality is often delayed by your hope. You keep the bond alive with your availability. You keep the story open with your messages. You keep the door cracked with your empathy. You translate their silence into excuses because you don't want to believe they can lose you. So the avoidant gets to stay in a fantasy where they haven't truly lost anything. They can say, we're not together, but still feel you there. They can act distant, but still receive your emotional energy through the chase. They can believe they have freedom without consequence. Detachment removes that fantasy. Detachment makes loss real. Because now, they can't sense you waiting. They can't feel you reaching. They can't rely on your emotional labor to keep them connected. And when that happens, the quiet becomes different. The quiet stops being relief and starts being emptiness. And emptiness is where their defenses get tested. This is why your calm absence can hit harder than your tears. Tears are a signal. I want you. Calm absence is a statement. Tears keep the emotional loop alive. Calm absence breaks the loop. Tears keep you predictable. Calm absence removes the lever they unconsciously used, the lever of distance. And without that lever, they are forced to sit in the consequences of their behavior. Now, this keynote also has to be handled with honesty. Calm absence does not guarantee they will come back. Detachment is not a magic spell to make someone value you. Detachment is a truth serum. It reveals what's real. If they have capacity, calm absence can create reflection. It can create missing. It can create the realization that you were a rare kind of safety they took for granted. If they don't have capacity, calm absence will still protect you, because it stops you from being drained by the cycle. This is why detachment is not revenge. Revenge is focused on their pain. Detachment is focused on your peace. Revenge says, I want you to suffer. Detachment says, I refuse to suffer anymore. Revenge tries to control their emotions. Detachment stops allowing them to control yours. And here's the most important part of this keynote for keeping viewers engaged. It promises that you'll explain the mechanism, not just the concept. It tells them, I'm going to show you why this works psychologically. That builds curiosity, because the viewer has been trying to use emotion to create value, and it hasn't worked. They've tried being softer. They've tried being more understanding. They've tried being more patient. They've tried being more available. And they're tired. So when you say, your calm absence hits them harder, the viewer thinks, how? Why? What do I do? And they keep watching because they're not looking for inspiration anymore. They're looking for liberation. Detachment is you stepping out of the emotional bargaining. It's you letting the silence be the consequence. It's you letting reality become unavoidable, not through drama, but through the most powerful thing a person can do in an avoidant dynamic. Stop chasing and start choosing yourself. Here's the shock. Avoidance can survive your emotions, even your anger and paragraphs, but they struggle with one thing more than anything else: your calm absence. This keynote matters because it flips what most people instinctively do when they feel dismissed. When someone acts like losing you was nothing, your heart wants to prove it was something. You want to make them feel it. You want your pain to be visible enough that it finally becomes real to them. So you cry, you confront, you explain. You send long messages trying to be understood. You list the memories, the sacrifices, the moments you stayed. You do it because you want closure, but deeper than closure, you want validation. You want them to recognize your value. But an avoidant nervous system is often built to escape emotional intensity, not absorb it. That's why your emotions, even when they are completely valid, don't always create the effect you hope for. To you, your tears mean love. To them, tears can feel like pressure. To you, your paragraphs mean honesty. To them, paragraphs can feel like obligation. To you, your anger means, I matter. To them, anger can become proof that closeness equals chaos. And if they already associate emotional intensity with danger, they'll do what they've always done to feel safe: shut down, withdraw, minimize, detach. That's why they can survive it. Not because they don't care, but because survival is literally what their nervous system is doing. They learned long ago in some form that being emotionally close can hurt, that being responsible for someone's feelings can be overwhelming, that conflict can feel like losing control. So when you bring intensity, they don't always meet it with compassion. Sometimes they meet it with distance. They go quiet, they become cold, they act unbothered, they disappear. And the more you push, the more they pull away, because pulling away is how they regulate. Now here's the shock inside the shock. Your reactions, even your pain, still keep you emotionally present in their world. Because if you're reacting, you're still orbiting. If you're sending paragraphs, you're still investing. If you're crying and pleading, you're still proving attachment. You're still giving them the one comfort they quietly rely on, the comfort of knowing you're still there. Your emotional intensity can actually reassure them that they haven't truly lost you. Even while they act distant, they can step back and still feel your reach. They can disappear and still have your attention waiting on the other side. This is why calm absence is different. Calm absence removes the reassurance. Calm absence removes the chase. Calm absence removes the predictable pattern they learn to expect. Calm absence is the first time the avoidant experiences the real possibility of loss without a cushion. And that's what makes it hard for them. Because avoidants often handle connection through control. Not control as manipulation, but control as nervous system strategy. They control the temperature by pulling back. They control the intensity by going quiet. They control vulnerability by keeping things undefined. And as long as they believe they can pull away and still keep you emotionally attached, they feel safe enough to keep repeating the pattern. Their distance has power because it creates your response. But calm absence breaks the lever. When you don't respond, when you don't chase, when you don't fill the silence with emotion, their usual strategy doesn't produce the same result. Distance no longer brings them both relief and reassurance. It brings only quiet, and quiet forces reflection. Quiet forces them to sit with the emptiness of what they created. This is why calm absence hits them harder than your anger. Anger gives them a reason. Anger gives them a story. They can say, this is why I needed space. They can label you as too much, dramatic, intense. And that label protects them from facing the real issue, their own avoidance. Your calm absence gives them no villain. It gives them no chaos to blame. It gives them no emotional noise to hide inside. It's just reality. You're not available to be managed anymore. And then something begins to happen inside them that many people don't see, because it doesn't always show up immediately. At first, they may feel relief, because the pressure is gone. They may distract, stay busy, act like it's fine. But then the quiet starts to feel different, because they can't sense your emotional presence anymore. They can't rely on your text to keep the bond alive. They can't assume you're waiting. They have to face uncertainty. And uncertainty is what you've been living in, but now it's theirs. This is where missing can begin, not always as romance, but as impact. Impact is the realization that your energy was a stabilizer in their life, that your warmth was a comfort, that your presence made things feel safe, even when they didn't know how to admit it. And when that stabilizer disappears calmly, without drama, they start feeling the gap. But this keynote is not telling you to disappear as a tactic. It's telling you to stop leaking your power through reactions that keep you stuck. Calm absence is you choosing dignity over explanation. It's you refusing to beg for recognition. It's you letting your value be revealed by what they lose access to when you stop chasing. Because the truth is, the person who can leave you like it was nothing is not proven wrong by your tears. They are proven wrong by your life continuing, your standards staying firm, and your energy no longer being available for free. I'm going to explain what's really happening inside them when they act unbothered. Why fine is often a shield, and why their comfort comes from assuming you'll always be back. This keynote is the moment you stop taking their calm face as a final verdict on your value, and you start understanding it as a coping strategy. Because what hurts the most about avoidance isn't just the leaving, it's the way they leave. The way they can go quiet and then show up the next day like nothing happened. The way they can end something and seem okay. And your mind, trying to make sense of that, starts translating their calm into a cruel meaning. I meant nothing. But fine is not always peace. Fine is often a shield. For many avoidants, emotional closeness activates a fear response. Not because you did something wrong, but because intimacy demands presence, responsibility, and vulnerability, and their nervous system learned early that vulnerability is risky. So when a relationship gets real, when emotions deepen, when you start needing consistency, their body can interpret that as danger. And when the body interprets danger, it doesn't sit down for a heart-to-heart conversation, it protects itself. That protection can look like shutting down, minimizing, going numb, distracting, focusing on work, acting independent, acting fine. So when you see them acting unbothered, you might be looking at defense, not truth. Defense is when the mind says, I don't care, so the heart doesn't have to feel. Defense is when they detach to avoid the discomfort of acknowledging what the bond meant. Defense is when they keep the story small so the pain stays manageable. Because if they admitted you mattered, they'd also have to admit they lost something. And loss requires feeling. Feeling requires vulnerability. Vulnerability is the thing they avoid. This is why many avoidants don't process in the moment the way you do. You feel everything up front. You grieve, you cry, you think, you replay, you ask questions. They often delay, they compartmentalize, they distract, they act normal. But delayed grief is still grief, it just arrives later, often in strange forms: restlessness, irritability, loneliness, rebound behavior, suddenly missing you at night, suddenly thinking about you when they see something that reminds them of you. The absence doesn't always hit them immediately, because their system is designed to avoid impact until it becomes impossible to avoid. Now, the second part of this keynote is crucial. Their comfort often comes from assumption. Assumption is the invisible thread that keeps avoidant dynamics alive. They assume you'll be there. They assume your love is stable enough to survive their instability. They assume you'll understand. They assume you'll forgive. They assume you'll keep the door cracked open. And if you've been a loyal, empathetic person, you probably gave them evidence for that assumption. You answered when they came back. You soothed when they withdrew. You accepted "I'm busy" as a reason for silence. You reopened the connection without repair. So their nervous system learned something simple: I can create distance and still have access. This is where the win happens, not because they are trying to win, but because the pattern makes them comfortable. They get the freedom of distance without the consequence of losing you. They get to avoid discomfort and still keep attachment. And your nervous system is the one paying the price, because you're the one living in uncertainty while they live in control. So when you detach, what you're really doing is removing the comfort of assumption. You're removing the idea that you will always be there no matter how they behave. And that's why detachment changes everything. It turns vague connection into real stakes. It turns fine into something they have to confront. Because when you stop chasing, they can no longer rely on the invisible thread of your availability to keep them emotionally safe. This keynote is also where you teach your audience something compassionate but powerful. Don't personalize what is actually a pattern. An avoidant acting unbothered is not always a sign that you weren't valuable. It's often a sign that they don't know how to hold value without feeling trapped by it. They can love someone and still fear what love requires. They can care and still avoid accountability. They can miss you and still resist repair. And if you misunderstand this, you'll keep trying to prove your worth in ways that actually make them feel more in control. So the key is to stop reading their calm as your failure. Their calm may be their shield. Their calm may be their numbness. Their calm may be their denial. Their calm may be their coping. And the reason they can stay calm is because they're leaning on the assumption that they haven't truly lost you. As long as they believe you're still emotionally near, they don't have to face the full consequence of their distance. That's why the most powerful shift is not you making them feel your pain. It's you removing your availability to the pattern. Not in bitterness, in clarity. Because when the assumption disappears, reality finally arrives, and that's when the avoidant has to face what fine was covering up all along. Then we'll flip the rules, because detachment removes the emotional oxygen from the cycle, and that's when silence becomes consequence, and the quiet starts getting loud for them. This keynote is where you stop seeing detachment as a mood and start seeing it as a decision. A decision to stop feeding a dynamic that survives on your emotional labor. Because an avoidant cycle doesn't stay alive only because they pull away. It stays alive because you keep reaching. They withdraw, you pursue. They go quiet, you fill the silence. They become vague, you become clearer. They delay, you wait. And without realizing it, your nervous system becomes the engine that keeps the connection running even when they are emotionally absent. That's what emotional oxygen is. It's the constant supply of your attention, your explanation, your availability, your forgiveness, your patience, your hope. Oxygen is what prevents the relationship from facing reality. Oxygen is what allows an avoidant to disappear and still feel connected. Oxygen is what lets them keep you in their orbit without having to hold you with consistency. When you remove that oxygen, you don't create drama. You create truth. And truth is uncomfortable for an avoidant because truth requires them to feel what distance actually costs. Let's be very clear about something. In the old rules, their silence had a payoff. Silence reduced pressure for them, and your reaction increased reassurance. Even if they didn't admit it, they could sense you still cared, still waited, still hoped. They might have told themselves they wanted space, but your pursuit quietly comforted them, because it meant they hadn't truly lost you. Their nervous system got to regulate by pulling away, while still receiving the safety of knowing you were attached. So silence felt like relief. But when you detach, the rules change. Silence no longer triggers your pursuit. Silence no longer triggers paragraphs. Silence no longer triggers you trying to fix it. Silence now meets stillness. And stillness turns their silence into consequence, because a consequence is simply a result that removes comfort. It's not punishment. It's not cruelty. It's the natural outcome of behavior meeting a boundary. This is why detachment can feel terrifying at first. Not because it's wrong, but because your nervous system has been trained to react. You feel their silence and you want to restore connection immediately, because uncertainty feels like danger. So when you choose detachment, you may feel restless, tempted, anxious, like you're doing nothing, like you're losing. But what you're actually doing is refusing to continue the one-sided labor that kept the cycle alive. You're letting the relationship stand on their effort too, not just yours. And here's what happens on their side. At first, many avoidants feel relief. The pressure drops. The emotional intensity disappears. They may even think, good, it's over, or finally peace. They distract themselves, work, friends, gym, scrolling, anything to stay away from feeling. But then something changes, because the quiet doesn't contain you anymore. They can't sense you reaching. They don't have your messages to reassure them. They don't have your forgiveness to reset the story. They don't have your hope keeping the door cracked. And that's when the quiet starts getting loud. Because now silence is not just space, it's emptiness, and emptiness forces reality. Emptiness forces the question they avoided. Did I actually lose them? Are they really gone? Why aren't they reacting? Why does this feel different? That discomfort is the beginning of missing. Not always romantic, but real. It's the moment their system realizes the old pattern is not producing the old safety. This is also why avoidants often return not with repair, but with a test. They hover. They send a small hey. They like your story. They ask something casual. Because they're trying to restore oxygen. They're trying to see if the bond is still there without having to face the full accountability of what happened. A test is safer than repair. A test lets them feel connection without vulnerability. And this is where detachment becomes powerful, because detachment is not just not texting. Detachment is not just silence. Detachment is not just distance. Detachment is refusing to restore oxygen without responsibility. It's you not collapsing the moment they hover. It's you not giving full access because they reappeared. It's you not treating contact as proof of change. It's you staying steady enough that the only way back into your life is through maturity. This keynote flips the rules because it makes the relationship depend on real behavior. When you detach, you stop making their comfort your job. You stop cushioning them from consequence. You stop translating their silence into excuses. You stop keeping the bond alive by yourself. And once you stop doing that, the dynamic can no longer survive in its old form. It either evolves into something healthier through communication and repair, or it collapses. And here's the deeper win that your viewer needs to feel. Even if they never come back, detachment still saves you, because it gives your nervous system its freedom back. It breaks the addiction to uncertainty. It breaks the habit of waiting. It breaks the pattern of checking, chasing, hoping. It brings you back to your life. Because the real power of detachment is not making them miss you. The real power is making you whole again. And when you are whole, silence doesn't feel like a verdict. It feels like information. It tells you what you need to know. And that is when you stop living in the cycle and start living in reality. And in the final part, I'll give you the one calm question to ask if they return, the question that exposes instantly whether it's real growth and repair or the same loop wearing a new outfit. Because the most dangerous moment in an avoidant cycle is not when they disappear, it's when they reappear. It's when your heart has been starving for contact, and suddenly you get a crumb. Like a casual check-in, a late-night message that feels intimate but avoids responsibility. And your body reacts before your mind does. Your chest relaxes. Your hope wakes up. Your nervous system says, finally. And in that relief, people hand over their power again. That's why you need a question that keeps you anchored. Not a speech. Not a confrontation. Not a long emotional explanation that gives them 1,000 places to hide. One calm question that forces the truth into the room. Here's the question. What will you do differently next time you feel overwhelmed and want to pull away? This question is powerful because it does something most people never do. It moves the conversation from feelings to capacity. Most people ask, do you miss me? Do you still care? Why did you do that? Where have you been? And those questions can be answered with words that soothe you but change nothing. I've been busy. I was stressed. I didn't mean to hurt you. I do miss you. An avoidant can say all of that and still repeat the same cycle next week. Because the problem isn't whether they feel something. The problem is whether they can handle the responsibilities that come with closeness. So this question asks for behavior, not emotion. It asks for a plan, not a vibe. It asks for repair, not a reset. And the reason it exposes everything is because someone returning for real growth won't be threatened by it. They may feel uncomfortable, yes, but they'll understand why you're asking. They will acknowledge the pattern. They will take ownership. They will say something like, I shut down, and I know that hurt you. Next time I'm overwhelmed, I'll communicate it earlier. I'll ask for a day to reset. I won't disappear. I'll set a time to talk again. That response shows maturity. It shows the ability to be accountable without collapsing into shame. It shows a willingness to build structure. But someone returning for comfort will respond very differently. They'll avoid the question. They'll get defensive. They'll minimize. Why are you making this serious? Can't we just move on? You're overthinking. They'll try to pull you back into warmth without addressing the wound. They'll want the benefits of connection while skipping the responsibilities that protect you. And if you've been in this cycle before, you know what happens next. You accept the reset. You feel good for a moment, and then the same pattern returns. Silence, distance, confusion, and you're back in the waiting room. This keynote is not about catching them out. It's about protecting your peace. Because the truth is, people who truly value you won't be offended by your need for emotional safety. They won't treat accountability like an attack. They won't call you needy for wanting consistency. They won't punish you with withdrawal because you asked for a plan. The only people who fear this question are people who want access without responsibility. And this is where detachment becomes real. Detachment is not just ignoring them. Detachment is not just no contact. Detachment is the ability to stay steady when they reappear. It's the ability to not confuse a message with maturity. It's the ability to not confuse your relief with real change. It's the ability to let their response to one question show you the truth, so you don't have to spend months trying to figure them out again. The most important part is what you do after you ask. Because words are cheap when someone wants comfort. So you watch behavior. Do they follow through? Do they communicate proactively? Do they show consistent effort? Do they repair when something goes wrong? Do they handle your needs with care instead of punishment? Because real growth is not proven by how emotional their return is. It's proven by how consistent they become afterward. This keynote is also where you remind the viewer of something deeply freeing. You don't need to be chosen by someone who only returns when it's convenient. Being chosen is not the prize if the cost is your self-respect. The prize is being in a relationship where your nervous system can breathe. Where you don't have to beg for basics. Where you can express feelings without fearing abandonment. Where love is built on structure, not on uncertainty. So if they return, you don't rush, you don't collapse. You don't punish, you stay calm. You ask one question. And you let that question do what your emotions couldn't do, reveal capacity. Because the moment you stop accepting resets without repair, you stop being trapped in the loop. You stop giving your best self to someone's worst pattern. You stop negotiating with silence. You stop proving your worth. And whether they step up or step out, you finally step back into yourself.